Mostly player or operation. Randy would go with that. He's going to talk about money and business, so I'll let Randy or Randy go ahead.
Well, hello everyone. And I'd like to thank SCA first and foremost for the quality of presenters they've had to so far today. I apologize for the next one before it goes any further. The economics of green farming, you know, I was talking to some of the board and they were saying, well, we need some other ideas about what we could talk about at the convention, because we seem to have so much time talking about chronic wasting disease, and although it's an important topic, it's refreshing to hear and talk about updates and conversations where there's a light at the end of the tunnel, even though it may be a little ways away, rather than just talk about the doom and gloom in the industry, because we tend to spend a certain amount of time talking just about doom and gloom. But before I start, there's a couple of disclaimers that I want to make. Firstly, as I think just about everybody knows, I'm not a scientist, I'm not a geneticist, I'm not an economist, I'm an elk farmer. And that's all I am. So what you're going to hear today is really my interpretation of how to value animals. I'm not going to suggest it's the only one, I'm not going to suggest it is the right one, but I hope that you agree, at least conceptually, that there is a value to having a higher end genetics. By higher end genetics, we often just think then of velvet antler, but that applies to any particular trait that we're looking to breed for. And depending on the market you're in, that'll make a difference. For the most part, the numbers that I'm going to use in the presentation are numbers that I've gleaned from either talking to other producers. Much of them are my own numbers. So I'm sharing some information with you. That's from my farm, but that's fine, I don't mind. And regardless, at the end of it, you can choose to agree with the numbers, you can choose to disagree with the numbers. But what will be consistent is the ratios that apply in the comparisons that what we're going to talk about. Is it the outline? Let's try. Okay, so I'm just going to talk really quickly about genetics, transferability of traits, how important are they, and then spend the rest of the short presentation talking about how do you value your animals. And I think the best way to do that is try to use some examples. Well, as I sat down to try to sketch something out for this presentation, the original concept, as I mentioned, was more about genetics. So as I thought about genetics, I thought, well, how do I define genetics? I mean, there's all kinds. I'm sure the science people and the biologists and the economists can all give you better definitions. But I went to my good friend Webster, and he defined it as, you can read it up there. But as I thought about it, we all know about genetics, and we've had this conversation, and I'm not sure it's our whiskey drinking presenter still here. He, if he is, hello there. And if he is, you'll recognize that there's been many a good bottle of scotch and rye, or whatever your preference is, drank over the discussion of genetics and what are the best genetics, and which bull is best or which buck is best, and blah, 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 blah. And at the end of the day, you're absolutely right. Everybody has their own choice as to what bulls they like best or what bucks they like best. And in today's world, there's a ton of good genetics out there. There's whitetail that are scoring over 600. There's certainly elk that are scoring over 600. And in fact, quite frankly, a lot of the guys I talked to, I know Bentley's going to talk about hunt farm operations a little bit tomorrow, I think it is. And at the end of the day, I'm starting to hear that, you know, a 500-inch bull is the new 400-inch bull. And when we started in this industry years ago, if you had a 400-inch bull, 20 years ago, you had the world by a pretty cozy spot. And in today's world, a 400-inch bull is a nice enough bull, and it may be very marketable in the hunt business, but in the sense of, is it top genetics? Not even close to it anymore. So I think the bigger issue for me when I sat down and working from the assumption that there are quality genetics out there, The next question that has to be asked is the one about heritability, because that's the one that really is so critical. You can take the best genetics in the world, you take a 60-pound bull if you want, a 50-pound bull, whatever number you're using, and the issue is that's a great bull, right off the bat. That's a super good bull. I'm assuming he's got the other traits we're looking for. That's a great bull, in fact. You won't see a whole bunch of them in the province. But the issue is, will that bull pass those traits on to the next generation? And I'm pretty sure that we can all talk about and are familiar with bulls and bucks that were great on the farm, or we bought semen from a bull and it just, he didn't pan out in a program. Now, is that the bull that doesn't have the heritability, that he doesn't pass on the traits? Or is that because the cows or does you put them on aren't of sufficient quality to reflect back the quality of the heritability traits that you're looking for? For me, when I looked at this, when I talked about genetics and heritability, I just look at it, this is my definition, as the application of selection for specific traits to maximize production and revenue specific to the objectives of the farm. Obviously, it applies to antler production, body size, temperament, feed production, conversion, mothering ability, conception rates, and quite frankly, any other trait that you might be looking for in your own particular program. Then I added, actually, because it's not an area that I'm particularly familiar with, but we've had people speak to it, the issue around resistant genotypes are something that has been spoken of, and I was quite excited actually to hear about some of the discussion there from Barry and what's happening with his work and what he's gleaning from that. And I think everybody's going to make their own decisions. Here's the chart that I pulled out of some material that I was looking at as to transferability or heritability of traits. Body size is sort of and I mean, again, these are from the material that I scrutinized and looked at. Body size is fairly transferable. If you're using big bulls and big cows, you're probably going to get big bulls and big cows. Temperament seems to be around the same line. Antler growth is one of the lower transferability or heritability traits. Mothering ability seems to be fairly transferable. A good mother usually produces good mothering cows. Conception is the bottom one that doesn't quite show up there. And I showed that one as high because if you're in any sort of operation, I put it down as fairly high because in my farm I transfer with a rifle, that particular trait. And they don't really get a chance to be around too long if they're not going to conceive. If they're not putting calves on the ground, or fawns, you're losing money. Are they important? Well, I originally had a line in there that said, damn right they are. I took that out. Just left it as, I think they're absolutely critical. They form the basis of your management program. But they're only as important as your data management. And I know some of you in the room are exceptional at data management and analyzing your production and tracking what results you have by individual animal, by cow, by bull, and even genetic group. And I mean, good for you if you're on that page. If you're not, I'd encourage you to find at least some middle ground. Because if you don't, you don't know. And if you don't know, you're not maximizing your profitability or your ability. You're probably maximizing or moving more towards maximizing your loss than your profitability. So I just summed it up as saying quality management program, including record keeping of key factors, will maximize your earning potential, and it will be the difference between profit and loss in most cases. So let's look at a few examples, so I looked at this particular example. If you were breeding, if you had a 12-year program going for a single animal, let's just look at what happens if you have 67% conception rate during that period of time, 90% conception rate. And we did have a couple of cows in our early years when I paid $20,000 a cow. Their conception rate was down around 2/3. And what do you do when you got a small number of animals? And the animal's worth $20,000 and it's not giving you a calf. Well, I can't keep it for one more year at that time. But in today's world, in today's dollar values, I'd suggest it would probably not be the best decision. So if you had 67% conception over a 12-year period, you'd probably end up with about 8 calves. 4 of them, we'll assume, were male, 4 of them female. If you sold 4 females at $3,000, that's revenue of $12,000 during the period of time. And like I said, the ratios will be the same whether you use this number or that number. Your ratios are going to be the same. 4 males with velvet production over the course of an 8-year velvet program for them. So extending it out beyond the 12-year program, but just looking at the total velvet revenue that you would possibly generate with average production would give you about just about $57,000 in velvet. So therefore, total revenue is more or less in the $67,000 or $69,000 range. Most of you probably looked at the other half of the page at 90% conception. You get 11 cows, 6 male, 5 female, selling them at the same price with the same velvet production. Total revenue is just over $100,000. Results $31,000 per cow over a 12-year period, or $2,600 per cow in that particular case. So your revenue, there's a difference of $32,000 in revenue over the life of that cow and the progeny that cow is going to produce. Not only that, I don't even go into, because you can make these formulas as complex as you want, because ideally if you're doing something like this, and you're dealing with a 67% conception rate, if you're selling those females or saving them for your own herd, you're probably going to be able to extrapolate lower production and lower conception from the offspring of those cows as well, unless there's a physical issue. We've certainly had that happen. I think probably all of us have. We've had cows that are too narrow. They're no good. Doesn't matter how good the genetics are. They've got to go. They're not going to give you a live calf. They'll carry to conception or carry to birth, but not do anything from that point. A dead calf isn't worth any money, except a vet bill. No offense to the vets. Well, even looking at meat production. So if you take a couple of different samples, and we've all been to farms. I know we whenever I visit somebody's farm, first thing I do is I look at their animals, and of course, and as you should be, everybody's proud of their animals. So we go look at the animals. You got to come see my cows. So we go look at the cows, and I think, gee, they look pretty nice. Then I go home and look at them, and I think, they may be bigger than my cows. So I go home and I look at my cows, and I think, no, I like my cows pretty good. And or sometimes I say, yeah, they are bigger, or sometimes I say, no, they're actually smaller. The point being that body size is something that can be bred for. If you're in the meat production business, if that's what your end goal is, and you're not intending to produce breeding stock primarily, or hunt bulls, or even be that concerned with velvet production, then if meat is your game, you want the biggest cows, and you want the quickest gaining calves, and young stock as you possibly can. Looking at this as an example, a 275-pound carcass at $5 a pound, $1,375. If you assume that you're sending bulls out at 450 pounds, at $5 a pound, $2,250 a carcass. You sell 20 females a year, $27,000. If you sell 20 males per year, $45,000. Flip that up to 325-pound carcass for females, that's a net increase of $250 per carcass per female sold. Bulls, that's an increase going to larger bulls or heavier bulls at 540. That's a net increase of $450 per carcass. If you then sell, and you work through the numbers again, I won't repeat them all for you. Ultimately, you're looking at an increase just on bulls at $9,000, or a total difference of $14,000 a year if you're selling 20 females and 20 males a year. So you can manage carcass weight, you can breed for carcass weight, and if you're going to be in the meat business, you should be doing both. If you're not, you're probably leaving money on the table. Somebody said to you, can we make $14,000 more a year selling the same number of animals? I don't think anybody would deny that would be a reasonable or good decision. Velvet production. I don't have a watch arm, so just give me a shout when we're starting to
Don't worry.
okay, it wouldn't be the first time I did that up here. If you take velvet production, and velvet production is something that I think is really something that you obviously can breed for and manage. If you start out at 8-pound 2-year-old and work their way up to a 32-pound 8-year-old, you're ending up with a pretty decent bull. And if you're looking at $50 a pound velvet, there you end up with with about $7,000 worth of velvet over that 6-year period. If you have a higher end product, 18-pound 2-year-olds that work up to 42, you're looking at substantially more, you're looking at $12,000 more. So I mean, the point is, and then if I also included it, you'll notice that on the back end of that is that at 8 years of age, or in the 9th year, for us, all of our bulls are gone by the time they're 9, usually at 8. But if you assume that you sell one, the lighter bull for $7,500, and your heavier bull gives you a little bit bigger bull and you sell them for $10,000. The reality is, in most terms, you're probably going to sell that first bull for $5,000 to $6,000, and the other bull should probably sell for $12,000 or possibly even higher if you're going to get up into the bigger weights. Usually, there is a bit of correlation, I think, between velvet weights and final score. Again, dependent a bit on outward design. But at the end of the day, look at the numbers. That first bull brings in $14,000 through his life, and the second bull brings in $21,000. There's a difference of $7,000. And those are traits that can be managed. And those are, I don't know, in fact, if 8-pound 2-year-olds to 32-pound 8-year-olds, if that's an industry average now or not. There isn't really any hard data that I can find. But I can tell you that I load 25,000 pounds a year with Blaine and the guys for the last few years with Norelko, and I see a lot of 2-year-olds that will be a lot lighter than 8 pounds. So, and I can tell you that we also load 18-pound 2-year-olds, and we load 50, 55, 60-pound antler too. But for the purposes of this example, I cut it off at 42 pounds rather than pushing it up to the 50-pound bulls. Okay, so average production, velvet production comparisons. 135-pound bull in the one example is $6,700, as I mentioned, over the 8-year period. The other bull is 226 pounds at $50, $11,000. There's just a difference in velvet price if you set aside the value of the hunt bull or the end product, or maybe sell it for meat, so let's just stop it at the velvet production. That's the difference of $4,550 in increased revenue over the life of that particular bull. If you go back to that cow that's giving you 90% conception, and you take the 5 bull calves that you're getting out there, that's a difference of $22,750 earned per cow by having better conception rates and better velvet rates. And that's significant, at least it is in my book. If you extrapolate that into a 40 bull velvet herd following the same cycle and using the average numbers that I showed you with the 8 pounds, 6,700 pounds of velvet over an 8-year cycle of 40 bulls, $270,000 in revenue. But if you have the superior herd, it's 11,000 pounds or $452,000 in revenue. That's a difference of $182,000 over 8 years, or $22,000 per year. You know, we were just talking about it, and here's something that I have always found interesting. I guess I understood it, but I always wondered a little bit about it, because lots of times we'd be having, when velvet was to 10, 12, 14, 15, 18, $22 a pound, people would always say to me, well, if we could just get to $40 a pound, that's our break even. And I heard that a lot. But what is that based on for production? What does your bull have to cut at $40 velvet to break even? Because that's the other half of the equation that people didn't talk about. Let's assume it's $20 or 20 pounds. So that would mean $800 per year velvet would be your break-even cost, or how the number that you feel that you need to be at to either make $1 or break even. Your bull herd, $800 a year. But if your bulls are averaging 25 pounds a year, then that average price of velvet drops to $32 to get the same $800. If your bull herd is averaging 30 pounds a year, that price goes to $26. So the producer who's producing higher end, higher production bulls, between 25 and 30 pound average for the herd, not any one age group, but across your herd, is going to be able to achieve that $800 at about $28 a pound. per velvet. So all of a sudden you go from a profit situation or a scenario of break even to an area where $40, $50, and what we're probably looking at hopefully this year, a price higher than that, sounds pretty good. So those are the things that bring value to your herd when you start looking at breeding and putting money into a herd to produce bulls, particularly, and cows that produce the bulls and give you that opportunity. This is part of a spreadsheet that I have at home that when folks were showing up at our place, they were always saying, well, how do you determine the value of the bull? Well, and actually, I should have followed these numbers in here. I had made some changes to them, and I didn't actually notice until last night that they didn't come across with the changes. It went back to the old numbers. So the numbers aren't quite the way I wanted to present them today, but you'll get the idea. So this basically is a spreadsheet. You can insert the number of cows bred per year. So I have in this example 30 at a 50-50 female-male ratio. I'm showing 15 of each, and that was one of the changes I made so we weren't at 100% conception rate, but it doesn't really matter, you're close enough. Plus I also had changed it to 1.5 pound increase in velvet. So this is assuming then that you're breeding to, and you can decide whatever a superior bull is that has reasonable heritability traits. So you're breeding your cows, and those bull calves coming off those cows are showing increases on average of about 3 pounds per year. If the price of velvet is $40 per pound, then we go to the next page of the chart, which is basically saying, oh, I guess maybe some of the changes were made. 14 bull calves a year, and then what becomes the increase in velvet. And the whole purpose of this exercise is to look at over a period of time what those bulls are going to do for you, or that superior bull is going to do. So the column where it says 14s, that's 6 years of calves. So basically it's an 8-year program because the bull starts cutting in year 2. So it's basically an 8-year program using a higher production or a higher producing bull. So as you go across, you can see that every year you're adding another group of bulls, and every year then your bull numbers are increasing, and every year you're producing more velvet. Well, after year 6, just on the increase, 14 bulls per year, averaging an increase on an annual basis of 3 pounds. So this isn't necessarily the total value of your production per bull. This is only showing the actual increase in the value of the velvet that those bulls are producing. After 6 years, basically you would have $29,400 worth of added value. And I believe this is at $50 a pound. Any questions on that page? If you then look at some other assumptions and say, okay, well, if I'm using a better bull, whether I get a heifer calf or a bull calf, they should be worth a little bit more money. So let's just assume that each of those calves, male or female, because of having the very strong genetics and production on one side, they go up by $200 per animal. Now you can spin that if it's a heavier bull and you're getting added meat, or just on the open market. This is really looking at it if you were selling the animals and could obtain $200 more per animal you sold year over year. You're looking at $63,000. Pardon me, you're looking at $33,000 increased value from getting basically 28 calves out of your 30 cows per year. Add that back into with your antler, and you're looking at an increased value of $63,000 over a 6-year period. So it shows you in year 1, $7,000, year 2, $15,000, year 3, $25,000, year 4, $36,000, year 5, $49,000. That's the added value based on a $200 per animal increase in value by moving your genetics into higher functioning and higher performing categories. So, how do you value a bull? Well, go back to this page. If you're using that, if you go out and buy that bull, and what is your break-even point on that bull? You still have the bull, and by the way, this doesn't include the production of that bull. So you're still drawing in $2,000 a year, let's say at a 40-pound bull. So 40 pounds at $2,000 a year over those 6 years is $12,000 worth of velvet that you've harvested off your breeder bull, plus the 63. You could argue that you have a $75,000 potential revenue there. Which is basically what I've just told you here. So how do you determine? I mean, are these numbers reasonable? Are they achievable? In my opinion, they are. I know we've certainly seen it. I've seen it on other farms that I've spoken to as well. You know, purchasing that superior bull is going to give you, you know, $29,000 plus you've got, in the case of the breeding program, you've got 28 calves times 6. You've got 144 calves that are, or 164 calves that are on the ground. Plus you've got the value of the bull. So you're looking at $63,000. Now, I'm not suggesting to you that the bull is worth $63,000, but I'm suggesting those are the factors that in my opinion, you should be looking at when you're looking at valuing bulls. In fact, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that that bull is worth $15,000 or worth $50,000. But I'm telling you these are the considerations, in my opinion, that I think have to be taken into consideration. Because I hear lots of guys, and we've had lots of guys come to our farm, and some of you will have the same story. They'll come to your farm and they say, well, what's your best bull? Well, I'd say, how much do you want for him? I want that much. Ooh, that's quite a bit. Do you have anything else? Yeah, this bull that costs about a third less than he does. How much for him? Well, I'll take him. Have you helped your farm situation, or have you held your farm back by making a decision and not putting the best bull you can on the ground with your cows? Breeding females. Well, there's an interesting topic, isn't it? If we just, and this was a bit of a challenge, so I came up with kind of an interesting study on this particular one. If you just assume a base value of $1,800 for your regular female of unknown background, if you assume that your average animals are producing 10 pounds at 2, maybe 30 pounds at 7, if you assume above averages are 12 to 15 at 2 and 35 at 7, and your superior group is producing 15 to 20 pounds at 2 and 45 pounds plus at 7, so you break it down into 4 categories. If you have followed the same concept of the 5 bull calves per life cycle, antler for 8 years, of velveting at $50 a pound, base production off the base cow at $146, or 146 pounds of velvet for that animal. And if you go through the above average, the above average, and your superior, you go from $7,300 worth of velvet to $16,000 worth of velvet off that group of animals. And then if you apply a formula and just basically extrapolate the increases from $1,800 based on singularly on the production of velvet, these are the numbers that you'll end up at. $1,800 for your base cow, whatever, mixed, unknown, or production, I'll call it. Average production within the range we've given you, $2,754, and above average at $3,300, and your superior cows are worth basically $4,000. That's basically for an open female. You can apply whatever numbers you want. For bred animals, I used a factor of 20%, which basically changes that to $2,160 to $4,730 at the high end for bred females of superior quality. You'll notice I didn't go into genetic lines. I'm not here to do that, I don't think. Didn't go into other factors because there's a number of other factors, and when I put this together, I put this thought process together based on today's market. But there's a number of other factors that obviously are very important to this calculation. The price of the products, velvet, meat, hard antler, hard horn bulls, is a significant factor. The number of animals that are entering the market is certainly a factor. If everybody had superior animals, that might clearly affect the value of superior animals. And also regulatory restrictions that are placed on our industry that either encourage participation in the industry or restrict it. So those are all external factors that will have an impact on this. So valuing females, well, here's some other considerations. You know, the superior females, offspring will produce an extra $22,000 worth of milk from those 5 bull calves over that 8-year period. Superior females will produce $4,000 more in revenue from meat sales based on conception alone. Superior production creates an additional, or potentially creates additional markets, breeding markets, and certainly gives you the opportunity for higher scoring hunt bulls, which from, as I say, the folks that I talked to this year are probably going to be in demand. Well, to buy or to breed, I guess that really depends on your business. I mean, you can draw your own conclusions. If you've got big bodied animals now and you're in the meat game, probably just fine doing what you're doing. If you have calving problems, mothering issues, those animals, as you well know, should be gone right away. There's always a lot of discussion, again, do I give it 1 miss, 2 misses, no misses, as to the point of culling. If you desire the resistant genes, you'll need to test your own herd and see where you're at and then decide. There's lots of discussion on that. And one thing that is, in my opinion, critical to the whole story that is so often overlooked is the cows. To me, the cows are the most important aspect of your breeding program, not the bull. You have 20 superior cows, you should get 20 above average to superior calves bred to a superior bull. Using 1 bull, I mean, if you've got 1 bull and a bunch of average cows, you're not really doing justice or giving the bull an opportunity to achieve what you purchased him for. And you're not getting a good return probably on the dollar that you invested for that bull. I just made a note, 20 average cows bred to superior bull will probably give you 20 average cows. When I did the work on this, and there may be more current information out there than what I was able to find, but one of the things that I noticed was that the heritability and transferability of antler production, basically using a superior bull, is more or less and often under 2 pounds per animal per year. So that's why I say if you buy that expensive high-producing bull and they're putting them on lower-end cows, you're not really giving the bull an opportunity to achieve. And then often you'll hear lots of discussion, well, that bull didn't pass on its genetics. And I'll give you an example, and you can love or hate the bull as you see fit. But Scott Groen's King, we used King and we loved him. He gave us the basis of lots of production, for antler I'm talking about only. And I know other producers that if you say King, they'll throw you out of their house because they didn't have any success with it. So, and certainly, you know, when I look back at it and some of those discussions now, I don't, in my opinion, or my guess at least, is some of that was really more reflective on the cows they had than it was the ability of the bull to transfer. If your goal is development production, you need to assess where you are with your herd. If you don't have the cows for the job, you know, in today's world, you can go out and buy cows. I gave you some sample prices on what I think is the right price ranges. But I mean, you can go make a deal for whatever cows you want if they're better than yours. In today's world, I think that's important. I've never been in this business to lose money, although I might confess that there was a year or two where we didn't make much. But I also know that we've made good money in this business too. And most of you know who we are and what we do. And a lot of that is because we've been able to demonstrate some fairly decent production. But at the end of the day, there's only one thing that really determines values, and that's the willing buyer and willing seller. So when you show up at the buyer's or at the seller's farm as the buyer, whatever you negotiate is probably the right price. But this talk today was really, my hope and intention was really just to sort of re-emphasize to you, we're in an up market, we're in a strong market for velvet. Meat has been strong for the last number of years. As producers, you have that opportunity to take advantage of those situations. And sadly, if you have low-end cows or inferior cows now for specific traits, particularly antler, it'll take you 3 or 4 generations to get those cows bred up by moving your program forward. And the reality is, if you look at the numbers of increased production, in my opinion, it makes more sense to go out and buy high-end, if you wish, genetics, if you can, cows that are 5, 6 years old, that have already put calves on the ground, bull calves on the ground, so you know what they're producing. Lots of guys come and say, I like to buy a yearling bull from you because it's less money. We don't sell yearling bulls because we've tried to sell breeder bulls, and yearling bulls mean nothing in the sense of anything but hope and a prayer. You can get some good ideas and some good guesses out of them. Hope and a prayer, what you're going to do. Anyway, that's my presentation, so thank you for your attention. If there's any questions, maybe ask, see if there is. Probably the presentation is so good you don't have to. Okay.
I actually already asked this question, but I didn't get the answer. I was looking for someone to ask you again. Sorry, I asked Barry earlier, and he misinterpreted that I was asking about the LL genotype perhaps being somehow unfit, which was not what I was trying to ask. In terms of the heritability and the trait transfer, what I had been meaning to ask him before was more about heritability and covariance of traits. Like in some situations, maybe not related to certain production, it's the case you might breed for a certain trait, and that trait covaries with something else that you don't want. So I just wanted, it seems like you've done a lot of breeding and you would have knowledge.
A breeding.
I'm only interested in that.
They, yeah, I think it's a fair question. I think I understand it. So basically, what you're saying, if you breed for a certain trait, it could be at the cost of another trait.
Yeah, like you might breed for good carcass weight or good antlers and end up with poor milk production or something. Like, to your knowledge, does that exist? Are they independent, or are there traits that co-vary in your experience?
You know, I don't actually know quite how to answer that. I mean, what we do on our farm, we breed our cows have always been based on size and mothering ability, first, along with the genetic side of it. Because without that, we don't have anything, I don't think. So those mothering traits, conception, size, and milk production and soundness, and our goals basically, we're looking at reasonable size and antler. And you can make it as complex as you want. I really don't think maybe I can answer your question.
No, that's fair. If there's something that you...
I've not noticed that if I'm getting bigger antlers, I'm getting smaller bulls or less mothering. So, any other questions?
So what age is the best age to buy? Like, not age when you're 75 years old, but I mean is age.
Thanks a lot.
How old should your bull be before you buy him, and how old should your cow be?
You know, again, if you're buying from a farm that has a proven track record of cows that are producing what you're looking for, whatever that trait might be, then it seems you can probably, in my opinion, you can probably, it would be reasonable to take a chance on even buying bred heifers. But if you're not sure, I like the idea, and I know not everybody agrees with this, but I've always liked the idea of buying a cow that's 5 years old in that range, because if she's going to have conception problems, you already know it. If she's going to be a poor mother, you already know it. And she probably has a bull calf that's at least 2 years old now on the ground, and you got some idea what she's going to do. And that'll change with the bull you put on her, but I mean, it gives you an idea. Good cows, I think, generally will give you, you know, maybe not your top end bull, but they're going to give you a pretty consistently reasonable producing bulls. So I like, in hindsight, if I were starting over today, I would either go to a farm that has a really solid record of culling animals and tight lines in their breeding program, so you know what they're producing. I wouldn't be scared to buy anything from heifers up to 5 years old. We sold a cow last year. She was, I think, 18 years old. I forget actually how old she was, but let's say she was 15. She was in the 13 to 18 range somewhere. And we sold her for, we give a discount on her. And like, who would ever want to buy a cow that's 15 years old? She's given us more 40-pound bulls than any other cow on the farm of any age over the 21 years we've been in this business. All she has to do is give you one calf, and you're money ahead, in my opinion. And I think at the end of the day, talking to the buyer, I think they would agree. For bulls, I'm not a big fan of buying 2-year-old bulls, really. Again, if you're buying from guys that you know and you maybe bought from before, that you know their program and whatnot, that's one thing. I like 3-year-olds. I mean, I've had 20-pound, 22-pound, 23-pound 2-year-olds that took a year off, or maybe took a couple of years off and didn't really achieve. Like, that should be a 50-pound bull, and maybe they end up at a 40-pound bull. They're a good bull, but you don't always get, not everything's perfect either. So. Okay, well, thank you very much.
What do you think about line breeding? How does line breeding work?
Well, I'm not a geneticist. I don't really like it. I'm a believer in it. I think that's a program where you can maximize traits. I know that you can also maximize weaknesses as well. But again, if you're starting with a strong program with the traits you want in your animals, I'm a believer, but there is a limit as to how tight you want to go with that, for sure. I think that's up to you, and there's lots of information on it that's better, much more intelligent than I am to answer that question for you. Sorry.
One more question.